Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and in this video, I'm going to give you my top buy low and sell high candidates heading into Week 8 of the 2021 fantasy football season. Last week, I advised you guys to buy low on A.J. Brown and Terry McLaurin, a couple wide receiver options, and well, after two explosive weeks out of those two, those buy low windows have probably closed. They've at least shut the door a little bit there. I also told you guys that you should sell high on Darrell Williams, running back of the Chiefs, after a 2-touchdown game filling in for an injured Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Well, last week, he really didn't do much in terms of fantasy, so you're probably not going to be able to sell high on him anymore. But don't worry if you missed out on those opportunities, because I have a great list of buy low and sell high candidates here for Week 8. All right, I'm going to start with my buy lows and then move on to my sell highs, and we're just going to go position by position. So I have one buy low quarterback, and yes, it is going to be one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. This guy rarely has bad games, and well, he just had a very, very bad game against the Titans, which is a team that they've been allowing quite a few points to quarterbacks this year. But they've really just shut down this Chiefs offense. They were coming off of a win against the Buffalo Bills, another one of the top teams in the AFC. So they've been hot, and they were able to shut down the Chiefs. But honestly, this is just one of the few chances that you'll have to potentially get Mahomes on the cheap coming off of a bad game. If the Mahomes manager in your league still sees him as the top quarterback option that he is, then move on. Don't overpay for a quarterback, because you can always find other quarterback options for production. But if he can be acquired for low quarterback one value, then I would definitely do that, because I expect him to continue to be great, bounce back after this tough game, and just be a rock solid fantasy quarterback option for your team. Now we're going to move on to the running backs. I have two buy low running backs, and the first one is going to be Darrell Henderson Jr. of the LA Rams. I'm going to go off of half PPR points, by the way, just because that's what I like to go off of when I'm talking about these players. But he is a low running back 1, high running back 2 option who just finished as the running back 28 in half PPR in Week 7. It was a great matchup against the Lions. They made it a competitive game somehow. And yeah, he just didn't have the best game for fantasy. And a ton of teams were on bye, and he still only finished as the running back 28. So that was definitely tough to see. But to me, this was just an off game. And as you can see by his scores right here, this is the worst fantasy game of the season that he has had by quite a bit. Obviously, he missed Week 3, and that was a tough matchup with Tampa Bay. So that could have been his worst game if he had played, but we'll never know. But you get the point, right? He only had 7.9. He hadn't finished below 14 points in half PPR all season. I do expect him to return to a great running back option as soon as next week against the Houston Texans. If you can get him, like I said, I like him as a low running back 1, high running back 2 for the rest of the season. So if you can get him for cheaper value than that, I would definitely do that. And now my second and final running back buy low candidate is going to be Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. And I will move this to half PPR. But yeah, he is a mid-tier running back 1 option for the rest of the season, in my opinion. And he's coming off a week where he finished as the running back 35 in half PPR. Again, with tons of running backs on bye, especially, so they're not even factored into that equation in terms of total running back finish for Week 7. He still finished only as a running back 35. He's already an elite running back option. He will have these down games where he's just not involved for whatever reason in the offense, but he'll also have blow-up games as well, as you can see, especially in Week 2, coming off of a 3.2-point week in Week 1 against the Lions. He then had 38.5 points. I could definitely see the same thing happening against Arizona on Thursday Night Football, coming off of a poor fantasy performance against Washington, where he only put up 6.4 points. I'm expecting a huge bounce back for Aaron Jones in Week 8, and I think he will be great for the rest of the season, especially because Davante Adams, wide receiver of the Packers, is on the COVID list. And I don't know if he's been technically ruled out yet or not, but the last I heard, it's extremely unlikely that he will be playing against the Cardinals on Thursday Night Football this week. So without Davante Adams there, I think that just increases the chances that Aaron Jones will be heavily utilized. I could see him having multiple touchdowns next week. And even if not, I still just like him rest of season as a running back 1. But I could definitely see him having a huge bounce back game against Arizona. And if he does, the buy low window, it's going to completely shut. So yeah, I expect him to have a fantasy boost for this game against Arizona, and for the rest of the season, I just like him as a mid running back one. So if you can get him for that price tag, I would definitely do that. Now we're going to move on to my buy low fantasy wide receivers, and the first one is going to be DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. For me, he is a low wide receiver one, high wide receiver two option for the rest of the season, but he has definitely struggled the last 3 weeks, and that has coincided with Sam Darnold, their quarterback, also cooling down quite a bit. You can see his fantasy points the last 3 weeks compared to the first 4 weeks of the season. Definitely not good. He is still seeing plenty of targets, and while there definitely still are concerns with this offense, I think they will eventually get somewhat on track, which will help DJ Moore return to a more consistent and explosive fantasy football option. CMC, Christian McCaffrey's eventual return, their star running back who's missed, a few games here. I actually think that will help DJ Moore, because I think you might think, oh, McCaffrey's going to come back, he'll soak up all the targets. Well, McCaffrey played these first few games, and DJ Moore was still seeing plenty of targets. If anything, I think if and when CMC returns, I think that will help the offense as a whole. It'll help them sustain drives. It'll give Darnold another option to go to, free DJ Moore up a little bit in the offense. So I think that will only help him once Christian McCaffrey returns. And just in general, this is just a star player, a great talent who is underperforming. And yes, there are concerns with the offense. But like I said, he is a low wide receiver one, high wide receiver two for the rest of the season. So if you can get him for that value or even cheaper than that, then I would definitely recommend doing that. And my second and final buy low wide receiver is going to be Brandin Cooks of the Houston Texans. I like this guy as a solid wide receiver two or an amazing wide receiver three or flex option for the rest of the season for your team. He did struggle in tough matchups in weeks 4 and 5 against Buffalo and New England, as you can see. Didn't really do much for fantasy. He did bounce back a little bit in week 6. Saw the targets, 13 targets, caught 9 of them for 89 yards, no touchdowns. So he did have a nice bounce back game there. And then once again in week 7, he returned to not doing much, only 5 for 21. He hasn't scored since week 2 either, which is a little unfortunate. And while this offense that he's in will limit his scoring opportunities because they're not that good in general, I do think he will start to score at least a little bit. I think we'll see a couple more touchdowns here and there. He won't be a heavy touchdown scorer, but 1 touchdown through 7 weeks, I think we will see that improve at least a little bit. And the offense in general is not great, like I said, but he is seeing targets. He is the clear number 1 wide receiver there, and he is a talented player. He gets the LA Rams in week 8. I could see him struggle again in that matchup, but just because of the volume alone, he could be at least decent for fantasy. But after that, this is where things heat up. He gets the Miami Dolphins, a bye week, the Tennessee Titans, the New York Jets, the Colts, the Seahawks, and the Jaguars. Now, there are quite a few good matchups in there. In fact, I'll just show you right here in terms of fantasy points against wide receivers. So I'll just type them on. Dolphins, giving up the second most. Then he gets a bye week. Titans, giving up the third most to wide receivers. The Jets are not giving up many points because teams are running all over them, but the Texans can't really run the ball. And since the Texans and the Jets are both kind of not the best teams, the Texans might have to throw against the Jets. So even though they're only giving up the second fewest points to wide receivers, that's more because of game script and teams are running all over them. I think if a team does have to pass against the Jets, they could definitely succeed. The Colts, they're near the top as well. The Seahawks, they're kind of, in the middle, doesn't scare me at all. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars are pretty close to the Seahawks. They're kind of like mid-tier in terms of points against for wide receivers. So yeah, there are plenty of great matchups along the way, and I would love to get him on the cheap and put him in my lineup the rest of the way. Now we're going to move on to my tight end buy low. This is going to be the last buy low on this list, and it's going to be Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. The opportunity is there now that Zach Ertz is no longer there at the tight end position. He was traded away to the Arizona Cardinals. He had a good but not great game in week 7, which was his first game that he played without Ertz on the team. And so you still might be able to get him on the cheap and use him as a solid, kind of like a low tier tight end 1 option. He does have upside because he's a pretty talented player. So I'm gonna list him as a low tight end 1 option the rest of the way. But if he starts to see a little bit more volume as the only tight end there, he could climb those rankings and be more of a mid-tier tight end 1 the rest of the way. Okay, now it is time to move on to the sell highs. I have 3 players. I got 1 running back and 2 wide receivers. This is the running back right here that I'm going to talk about. Damien Harris of the New England Patriots. After 2 great weeks, As you can see, he had 2 great weeks in a row. One of them being against the New York Jets, who are giving up the most fantasy points to running backs. I would sell high on him, keyword sell high, if I can get running back 1 value, especially in PPR leagues where his value takes a hit due to his lack of involvement in the passing game. Again, this is called a sell high. So if you can't get good value for him, I would keep him, because to me, he's a running back 2 type of option, especially in the right matchups the rest of the way. He will be great in the right matchups and the game scripts where he is allowed to carry the ball a lot and see work on the ground and not be not in, against good run defenses. I think he might struggle as well, but just like all carry dependent running backs, he is subject to being less involved when the team needs to pass the ball a little bit more. That's what I thought would happen against Dallas, but that was a close game, and he was able to see 18 carries. He exposed them for 101 and a touchdown on the ground, so he did well in that game. He does have some good matchups here. He has a good matchup against the Chargers. I guess he really only has one good matchup coming up. It's against the Chargers, who are giving up the second most points to running backs. But then after that, he gets a couple tough matchups against the Panthers and Browns, and those will be tougher than his previous 3 matchups against the Jets, Cowboys, and Texans. So to me, like I said, he is a running back 2 type of player, especially in the right matchup, or if you expect the Patriots to be leading the game and able to run the ball quite a bit. So if you can get better value than a running back 2 type of player, I would do that. But if no one is willing to pay up for him, then I would just keep him on your team. Now we're going to move on to the wide receivers. And again, I need to stress the importance of this being a sell high list. So I am not getting rid of this player for anything other than crazy value. And the player we're going to talk about here is DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals. He's currently averaging about 60 yards a game on about 4.7 receptions per game. That's fine, that's fine, but it's not really up to his standard. He's usually shown more production than what he has, especially in terms of yardage and receptions. But he just hasn't really been doing that this year so far for some reason. Luckily, he has had 7 touchdowns in 7 games, which is helping his fantasy production quite a bit. So a lot of his fantasy points are coming from those touchdowns. Obviously, Hopkins is an elite talent, and he could continue to score those touchdowns in this great Arizona offense. So the touchdowns could continue. Obviously, with most players, you expect touchdown regression, but with DeAndre Hopkins, he's the type of player where he could just continue to score crazy touchdowns. So that is always an option with him. Also, in addition to that, his yardage could increase as well. Maybe they're just not getting him involved so far this season, but they start to do it later on. But if I could trade him plus something maybe for a more secure wide receiver option like a Devontae Adams or a Cooper Kupp, or if I need running back help, if I could trade him away for a really solid running back 1, then I would consider doing that. The Devontae Adams trade for call right there is a little murky now because Adams is on the COVID list. So maybe you don't quite trade for Adams yet if you need Hopkins to play this week. But you get the point, right? He's kind of depending on touchdowns, and while those could continue and maybe the yardage goes up, if you could trade him in right now for a more sure thing that's already doing those things and is expected to continue, or if you need running back help and need a solid running back 1, then that is when I would consider trading away Hopkins. But I am not trading away DeAndre Hopkins for anything other than top tier value. So if you can't get that value, just hold on to him. He'll be a good option the rest of the way. And the final sell high player on this list is going to be Ja'Marr Chase, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. He is currently the number 2 overall fantasy wide receiver in half PPR scoring. I do think he will continue to be great, but the rookie should have some regression coming eventually. And remember, I've said it for the other players, but this is a sell high. I'm only willing to sell Ja'Marr Chase if I can get crazy good value for him. Only sell him high for a top tier player or a top tier player plus something else in return. Maybe you need some running back help. You could trade him for a locked in high running back 1, because Ja'Marr Chase was sort of like a mid-round draft pick. So chances are you drafted some players before him who are, in that they're kind of locked into your lineup, hopefully. So maybe you drafted some wide receivers earlier and they're also in your lineup, and you don't, they can fill those wide receiver spots. If you need running back help, for example, you could sell high on Ja'Marr Chase and get a really elite running back 1 option. Again, I do love Ja'Marr Chase the rest of the way. He's been nothing but amazing for fantasy. I just could see him, he's just been so good. And as a rookie, I could see him start to not do this amazing, 6 touchdowns in 7 games. That could come down. But he is a crazy good talent. So kind of like with Hopkins, I would only be willing to trade him away if I'm getting insane, and I mean insane value in return. But this is a type of player, there's so much hype around him. You might be able to get an absolutely crazy trade package in return if you're willing to trade him away for the right deal. All right, that's going to do it for my buy low and sell high list heading into week 8 of the 2021 fantasy football season. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please make sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it or found it helpful. Subscribe to the channel for more fantasy football content, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.